All right, thanks for being with us today. We are here with Danny Dover, and Danny is actually probably our most unique and interesting guest that we've had on the summit, because Danny's actually someone who started out in kind of the business, entrepreneurial, corporate world and transitioned into really living a really cool lifestyle, and was doing some research and set out a list and had about 100 goals, I think it was, and checked them all off. And so we're probably one of the people who are talking to him right after he's completed his life list. So welcome to the summit, Danny.
Well, happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and the reason I mentioned that you have such a great perspective is you seem to have taken almost what seems like the traditional route of, go out there, get a job, succeed at a job, make some money, and then you've also kind of taken this almost artist's passionate life and, really been able to do some cool things and have obviously earn a living and stay, active while you are doing that. So tell me why you've kind of devoted your life to doing this, and why you've been passionate about kind of sharing your journey with really millennials. I think have really grown and attached to your message.
Sure. Well, let me start at the beginning. So if you rewind about 6 years or so, I had a pretty decent job. It was at a startup that at that point no one had ever heard of. It was going well, but I was looking for something more. I was looking for something a little more fulfilling, is what it really comes down to. At that time, I didn't know it, but I was starting to deal with depression. And so I was very slowly starting to leak out my motivation. I was very slowly starting not to want to get up in the morning. And then I started realizing that I wanted to be doing something bigger and better. So happily, I was able to leverage that job and jobs that came after that and technology in general to work on what I really see as my purpose, which is to finish my life list. So a life list is very similar to a bucket list, but a bucket list you try to do before you die, which is rather morbid. Whereas a life list is something that you try to do before a deadline you set for yourself within your life. So for my deadline, it just happened to be May 25th, 2017, which at the time of recording is about 6 months from now. And I've been working on this list ever since. So it started with about 150 items, kind of depends how you count them. And at this point, I have just 2 left. So it's been a heck of a journey. It's been really, really interesting. I've been all over the place. I've been to about 100 countries. I've lived abroad 8 or 9 times for 3 months or more. Ran marathons, gained a whole lot of weight, lost a whole lot of weight, wrote a best-selling book, gave a TEDx talk, got a patent, did all these kind of interesting things of all different kinds of lifestyles. So some of them were very scientific, some of them were very artsy, some of them were a mix of between. So that's what I've been working on. That's kind of my life journey so far.
Wow. That's an incredible journey. And so what was there a moment or a time, or maybe it was a decision that you made that you feel was important for you to chase that fulfillment? Because you talked about you kind of missing that. So can you take us back to that moment and what that was like?
Yeah, so let's talk about the kind of the theoretical, philosophical aspect of trying to find what it is that I was passionate about, what I was looking for fulfillment. And then let's talk about kind of the real side of this as well, which is like, how the heck do you get time and money to do these things? Because that's really rough. So starting with the kind of the bigger scope thing here, when I was kind of in the worst part of my depression, so to give a little bit of context there, I was going to the University of Washington. I was just about to fail out. I had almost failed out of high school. And I knew that I wanted something. I knew I wanted fulfillment. I felt like I had some potential, but I had no motivation. I couldn't get out of bed. I ended up missing the final because I just couldn't get myself out of bed. There was nothing there. So when you're in a place like that, you don't have a lot of options. You can't get up and start doing all of these amazing things. Instead, you have to start working at yourself internally, because that's your only option. So at that point in my life, I was like, well, I want to know what my bigger picture is. I want to know what my bigger vision is. And I really fought on that problem for a long time. And I couldn't come to a solution. It was too broad of a question of why am I here? What's the purpose of my life? That's a very broad spiritual question. I couldn't figure it out. So I ended up just picking one almost randomly. I just picked this life list, and I just said, you know what? I can't figure out what my true passion is, so I'm going to make it up. I'm going to create my true passion and just choose it. And once I made that choice, that's when my life fundamentally changed. Now, after that is when the hard part came, and when reality struck, because you need time and money to do things, and both of those resources are very hard to get. And you can trade one for the other, certainly, but then you don't have the other. So what I did with the Case of My Life list is I started very, very small and local. So the very first thing I did on my bucket list was not particularly noteworthy at all. Instead of getting a normal shave, just doing it myself, I got a straight razor shave, like I'd seen in movies and stuff, like kind of old-timey. And that's something perfectly achievable, and even people who are in rough spots can achieve something like that or take some kind of baby step in that direction. And then from there, I slowly started working on it. I wasn't ready to do my own business at that point, so I kind of slogged through my job because that's what was paying the bills at the time. And when I was able to build up a little more leverage at that job, then I asked for a raise and went from there. And then I started kind of climbing out that ladder. So from there, I got additional promotions. From there, I got a nicer job. And then from there, I was, I'd rather just be working for myself. But I do want to reiterate that unlike Hollywood movies, this was a very slow process. There was no can't see theme song that played and then fast forward all the things. No, it was bit by bit, slowly, very unimpressive small steps for a long time.
Yeah, small wins. So that was kind of the philosophy, and you talked a little bit about kind of creating that vision. And so how did you land on this life list? Is that something that you had wanted to do for a while, or is that something that you had kind of come at this time? Because I think a lot of people, they struggle with what is my purpose, and that's a lot of what we talk about at Millennial Skills, is not only being able to make money, but I think you've experienced that it's not sustainable if it's not fulfilling. And so being able to kind of do that from the onset, so that when we are in our 30s or 40s, we can be in a much better place than I think the boomers are in, and nothing against them. So what made you land on this life list, and when someone is kind of thinking about what they should pick for their purpose, any ideas on how someone should go about choosing that?
Sure. So I can only talk about my own experience because everybody's life is quite different. But what ended up happening to me is I landed on this almost due to blind luck. So what happened was when I was in these low parts of my life, I started asking people what made them happy because I was not happy. And these were the people who were coming to check on me, essentially. These were not people I was going out and finding. There was lucky enough there was the few amount of people who were coming to me. I asked them what made them happy, and that turned out to be a really silly question because that's going to be different for everyone. It's not particularly actionable. It's very hard to measure in any kind of way. And so they gave me kind of generic answers that weren't particularly useful. Eventually, I stumbled upon the idea of asking people what their favorite life stories were. And this was a much, much better question. Much better question, because people like talking about their favorite life stories. That's just inherent to the question. So when I saw people light up and tell me their life stories, from that I started writing down just the basic ideas. So if someone told me about the time they got pickpocketed in Barcelona and then wanted to go and pickpocket the pickpocket back, which happened to a friend of mine, I wrote that idea down because that sounds really cool. Or if someone went to a crazy rave in the middle of the desert, I wrote down that idea, and so on and so forth. From asking people their favorite life stories, that's where I got these life list items.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing that you changed the question, and all of a sudden the answers dramatically changed. And one of my mentors, John Berghoff, always talks about questions kind of changing the lens through which we see the world. So that's huge. So take me to kind of the next step and what that was like in setting up a lifestyle that you're obviously chasing, but then you also mentioned that there's a business side of that and being able to create some income for yourself. So talk to me a little bit about how that process was, and because I'm sure there were some challenges, and that was a journey in and of its own self.
Sure. So as I slowly started making progress on this life list, this was the first few. They were all local. None of them cost very much money at all. They were easily achievable items. As I slowly started to make momentum on that and crossing items off, I started to realize that I really liked this lifestyle a lot. And that corresponded with the time at my job where I was starting to travel a little bit. So it wasn't fun travel per se, it was work travel. Although sometimes those can be the same thing, but many times they're not. And in this case, I was like, you know what, I just want to do this the whole time, which meant travel and work on my list. And that was the idea. But with reality, you got to figure out, how you're going to pay for this. With travel, it's mostly a money thing for lots of folks. So I was like, well, I don't have any money. I'm already spending all my money that I'm making from this job. What can I do to make this more possible, to create this situation, this lifestyle? So again, I started just taking baby steps on this. So I started spending it significantly less, because what I realized very quickly was that it's a lot harder to make more money than it is to spend less money. because you're fully in control of how much money you spend. Generally speaking, there's some side effect, some exceptions to that, but it is much harder to make more money because somebody else is in charge of that. Usually your boss or your client or whatever it may be. So I started spending less, and so I started to get obsessed with the idea of minimalism. Minimalism is a great thing for someone who's in that place of their life because it doesn't cost anything. And in fact, it allows you, as a side effect, to save money. So I started getting obsessed with the idea of like, how can I live with less? And now this isn't like walking around naked. It's nothing extreme like that. It's more like, instead of having 5 pairs of shoes, could I get that down to 2, as an example? Or instead of having like, I don't know, 5 different colors of socks, can I get this down to just like 2 or 3 colors of socks? Like just simplifying things a little bit. And that resonated with me. That was something that worked really well for my specific journey. And then that opened up some doors because then I wasn't spending as much money on stuff. So clothing is an obvious example, but also food, cooking less, or instead of doing the normal escalator of lifestyle elevation, which is starting in like a really small apartment, probably crammed with a whole bunch of people. And that's where I was living at the time. That's how lots of people do it. Instead of moving that and moving in with yourself next, I just kind of maintain the lifestyle as opposed to getting up, as opposed to getting more stuff and bigger space and that kind of stuff. So that opened up some doors there. And then eventually I got to a point where I could start to take on my own clients while I had my other job. And the people at that job, the folks I was working with, were well aware that I was doing that. I was very clear about all that. But that was an important transition for me because instead of having to come up with all the courage to start my own company, just by taking that big leap, I kind of did this half and half thing where I still had my stable job. And then on the side, on the weekends, I was doing small clients on the side. And then that kind of grew and grew.
That's huge. And so I think it's always great when people have spent so much time, because I could hear that you've obviously spent a lot of time and reflected on it, but there's a lot of deep things in there. I mean, it seems really value-based. You talked about minimalism, and for me, I try and use stoicism as kind of that operating system. But I think that's awesome, and you've made some sacrifices that I think a lot of people maybe wouldn't be willing to do because it's not really the sexy thing. You made a lot of hard choices. So what I've noticed is that people connect a lot with how real you are in your blog, and how how much you share, from down to what it takes to prepare and what you take on all your ventures, and what's necessary. But you interact a lot with the millennial generation. What is some things that you think could help them to move closer towards a life of fulfillment, and then maybe even making some money along the way? Is there any things that, best strategies that you found has helped you or other people along your journey?
Sure. Well, first of all, I appreciate the compliment on my blog and on my writing, so thank you for that. And then as far as answering your question, for me, it is twofold. Finding your focus, or finding your what it's going to bring you fulfillment, or what your passion is. Those are really, really, really hard questions. And I think the first step is just to acknowledge that it's a hard question. This is not something that you're going to be able to figure out overnight. And that's okay. There's absolutely no problem with that. These are hard. After coming to that conclusion, I think it helps to start experimenting a little bit. Most people, although some people are exceptions, but most people aren't going to just figure this out overnight. They're going to have to dabble in lots of little things. So maybe they try out a new sport, for example, or maybe they start reading about a subject they've never read about. So doing that dabbling and giving yourself a chance to experience lots of different things, so you can start to have more insight on what you like and what you don't like. And then when you start to gravitate towards something, making that very clear in your mind, making that be your focus, creating a SMART goal if that's your thing. So for me, those are very important. A SMART goal is a goal that is specific, measurable, actionable, is relevant, and time-bound. So this is something that is very doable and something that you can say very clearly, I've done this or I have not done this. In that way, it's binary. So once you found this area that you like, create some kind of goals. And this doesn't have to be get your PhD in whatever that area is you like, or this doesn't have to be move across the world. It could just be a small little goal that you've made SMART, using that acronym, and making progress there. And then from there, baby steps. The real world is not like Hollywood. The real world takes time. I think that's both a blessing and a curse, but something I don't think people acknowledge enough, that things take time. And then just going from there and listening to yourself, using yourself as your compass. You're going to know if you're going in the right way Well, many times you're going to know if you're going the right way. Sometimes you won't, and that's when you got to rely on friends and loved ones.
Wow, that's great. I always talk about how millennials, they're like the microwave kind of generation, the toaster kind of generation. And I heard Chris Lockhead. I was listening to him speak, and he said we're the only generation that like stands in front of the microwave, and paces, but we just expect things to be there a little bit quicker. So. Tell me a little bit about, take me back to a story or a time where you kind of knew that you were on your path. I know you mentioned everybody's kind of has their own journey, but what was your experience like when you kind of had an inkling that this whole lifeless thing was going to be something that you were going to run with and really, make something out of?
Well, I actually have two separate questions or two separate answers to the question of like, when did you know this was going to be a lifestyle, and when did this? So to start with, I didn't know, and I felt that this was a direction I was interested in because I had done a few items on this, and I'd done a little bit of work-related travel, and I knew I wanted to do more of that. But I had no idea at the time how to make this a real possibility. But I felt something that this seemed like an attractive direction for me. But there was not. I don't think there was a moment when I was said, I'm full in, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to this. I think it was more, I slowly came to that conclusion and then took baby steps. Much later on the journey, so this would be 3 or 4 years later, I realized that I had finally gotten there. And it kind of came by accident in that I had done a lot of items on this list, and then I was joking around with a friend, and he asked me what was I going to do next, and I said, my next thing is going to space. And he's like, that is amazing. When are you doing it? I'm so excited. And I was like, no, man, I was kidding. I'm not going to actually go to space. I have no idea how to do that. It sounds really expensive. This was before all the Elon Musk stuff. So at that point, it seemed like impossible. But I realized that my friend really believed that that's what I was going to do. And that made me feel really, really good. Because at that point, I realized that I had reached outlier status. Outlier status being this thing where people just kind of believe that you're going to do these amazing things because you've done them many times before. So my favorite example of this, at least from my perspective, is people who run ultra marathons. I am not a runner myself, and so when I hear about people who run ultra marathons, I just file them away as outliers. Like, those people are crazy. I can't believe they do that. But if they tell me they're going to run 2 ultra marathons in a row, I'll probably just believe them because it's so far out of the scope of what's normal to me that they're already these outliers. So I realized in my own way, not from running, but in other ways, that I'd achieved that outlier status, and that felt really good.
Wow. So let's talk about, I was thinking about it, and what now? You said that you were going to divert your purpose a little bit to this, and so how do you, when you kind of think about the journey, how do you look back on it, and what is it now? Where do you kind of fit that into your story, and then talk a little bit about what's next for you, and how you're going to retarget that purpose.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I'm happy to say that this is really my lifestyle. I mean, working on this life list has become my story. And I really, really like that a lot. I feel confident that if I was going to die tomorrow, or I'm sitting on my deathbed tomorrow, that I could look back and I could be quite happy with what I've done. I feel really, really, I feel a lot of gratitude for that. It's a really a nice thing. And what I know from that is that I want to continue doing this kind of lifestyle. The thing that I want to change, though, is that my journey up to this point has really been about me. My blog is written in the first person, and it's all focused on me. And that was actually important for a while. I needed that. That's how I got to this point. But what I want to do going forward, as I mentioned earlier, I'm coming to the end of this list, is I want to help other people. So I want to help other people do their own life list items. Specifically, I want to stick with the theme. I want to do interesting things with interesting people. And I want to help facilitate other people to be able to do interesting things with other people, with interesting other people. And I'm still exploring what that looks like. I don't know what the logistics are yet. But that is definitely the direction I'm going to go going forward.
Well, you're doing it now, man. It was I was telling my fiance today. I'm like, yeah, I have an interview with Danny Dover, and she's like, who? And I was excited, and it was great. So you're already helping check things off the life list. So as we kind of move towards wrapping up, we got a few more questions, but I'm curious if you could go back to the beginning, of the journey and implement one skill or one habit, because a lot of what we talk about here is in personal development, and I think that's a very unsexy way to say it, but really we have to work on ourselves before we can really change anything else. So,
Mhm.
what do you wish? What skill or habit do you wish you would have had back at the beginning of the journey that might have made things easier, less stressful, more? I don't know, would have generated more income along the way? I mean, there's no right answer. You could take this anywhere you want, but what do you wish you kind of had at the beginning of the journey?
Well, I have a few things. First, I think I wish I really would have understood the idea that addition isn't possible in life without subtraction. So, for example, if you want to learn a new language, what that means is you're going to have to subtract things from your life. So does that mean you're going to spend less time with your boyfriend or girlfriend? Does that mean that you're going to sleep less hours so that you can do all the studying that's requiring? And that's really hard, because the reason that you're spending those times with those people you like is because that's an important part of your life. Or the reason you're sleeping that many hours is because your body maybe needs that many hours of sleep. So before you can add new things, so in my case, life list items, you have to subtract other things that are in your life. But that's difficult because those things are in your life for a good reason. And that's hard. So I wish I would have understood that earlier. Secondly, secondly, focus. I spent so much time just trying to figure out what the purpose of my life was. And for me, the solution was just to pick something and focus on it. I wish I would have come to that conclusion sooner, because I spent a lot of time basically just like paddling around, not getting anywhere. Only you can choose your own life purpose. And I think the trick is that instead of waiting for some sign, just to pick something. Since it's your own life purpose, you can't be wrong. Sure, you can change it if you want. But I think just having that focus earlier rather, would have been really nice. Third, SMART goals. I'm a huge believer in SMART goals. They're how I measure everything, and they're how I kind of take bigger problems and make them manageable by putting them into the SMART goal format. Something I didn't create, found it on the internet or in a book. I don't actually remember where, but you can find it all over. Lots of great books and lots of websites about the SMART goals. You can Google that. And then lastly, the thing I did not expect was that by sharing my story, it opened up really, really wonderful doors like this interview. You and I would never have met if I hadn't started sharing my story on my blog. And I have had an incredible amount of wonderful experiences with folks because they've read my story online or in books or whatever and reached out to me. And I did not see that coming. And that has been I can say it without the word probably, that has been the best part of this experience, has been people hearing this story and then me being able to experience it with them. That has been really fantastic.
Yeah. Have you read a book called The Purpose Economy?
No, I
Have you
haven't.
heard of it? It's the author's name is escaping me, but they essentially break down the purpose or someone's purpose into being a personal purpose and them being really kind of being the best version of themselves, being relational purpose. So really based on a family or an organization, really doing it with other people. And then some people have a societal purpose, and there's no right answer, but that people are kind of chasing a different purpose at different times. I'm curious for you, it seems like you've hit all three of them, but where you are right now, would you say that your purpose is more personal based, it's more organizational or family based, or more societally based? Where do you kind of land on that right now?
Oh, well, this fits in really well with the model that I think has a lot of truth to it, which is first you need to help yourself, then you can help your local community, then you can help the world. And I think I'm on step 1.5, which means I think I've helped myself. I actually feel quite confident in that. I feel good. I am now teetering rather on helping my local community. And local community, especially in today's world, can be defined in many ways because the internet can be your local community and all these things. So I think I'm teetering right between step 1 and step 2, with the aim of step 3 at some point later in my life.
Wow, that's great. Is there anybody that you mentioned minimalism. Is there anybody that you come back to or read a lot, or I'm just even selfishly curious about who some of your thought leaders are that you follow?
Sure. Boy, there's a whole bunch. So let's see. Tynan, I really connected with him with his early work, and he's a blogger, tynan.com. I really appreciated the transition he's been going through with his life over the last several years. Chris Guillebeau, when he was doing The Art of Nonconformity, both the book and the blog, I thought were excellent. He's kind of shifted more towards events at this point. Tim Ferriss, I love and hate. he's just, his ideas are wonderful, but there are certain things about him that bug me. But he's doing wonderful work, and I'm really grateful for that. Let's see. Joel Runyard is an inspiration of mine. He does wonderful work at Impossible HQ. I've started to get into some of Ryan Holiday's work on Stoicism. I'm a big fan. I think he generally does good stuff. Let's see. Geraldine DeRuiter, the Everywhereist. She's a wonderful and hilarious blogger. Check her stuff out. She's always hilarious. Legal Nomads. I'm forgetting what her name is. But you can find her at legalnomads.com. I think she does a really great job. She kind of just shows so I'm a digital nomad as well, and maybe you are. But she just shows everybody that, like, there's a better way to do this, and she just runs laps around everybody. I think she's really wonderful. And then I've gotten a lot into personal finance of late. So Mr. Money and Mustache is at the top of that list. J.C. Collins just came out with a book called The Simple Path to Wealth, which I found to be tremendously valuable. It's a very simple path. He's been great. I really like storytelling. So those are not usually individuals. It's different organizations. So The Moth is the leader in that. They're excellent. Snap Judgment, a podcast that does storytelling. I wish I could do storytelling the way that they do it. They're really wonderful. A little bit of Radio Lab. I kind of go in and out with Radio Lab. It's a podcast as well as many other things. They do lots of stuff. The TED organization, I'm obsessed. I'll watch a TED Talk, I'd say almost every day, just because they're great. And then I've recently gotten obsessed with Goodreads.com. It's like Netflix for books. It's great. It's my favorite feature I've realized of late is that if you rate a bunch of books that you want to read, it'll start emailing you whenever the price drops on those, which is great because those are books I really did want to read. And then it says, hey, this now only costs 99 cents instead of $9.99. So I keep getting those emails. I'm like, this is excellent. And then it comes with the audiobook for like cheap or free. And I was like, yes, wonderful. Like, genuinely adds for value to my life. That's that's just the ones that come to mind now. But wow, boy, there's a lot of people.
That's great. No, and I think what's important, part of my goal and my mission is to make it more just normal for that, for it to be normal for someone to invest in themselves. I think just the millennial generation, they're waiting for it. It's just not quite sexy enough to do yet. So it's just really cool to see that you have so many different influences. So that's awesome. As we wrap up here, Danny, where would you like to send them? And then any last words for the millennials?
Sure. So you can find out all about me, my story, and my contact information, and hopefully a lot of valuable things for yourself at lifelisted.com. That should be everything that you're looking for there. And then advice or ideas going forward, just keep fighting the good fight. I think we really live in a wonderful world, but it does require a lot of hard work, a lot of effort, and a lot of unpleasant things. So keep fighting that good fight. It seems like a lot of people are going in the right direction.
Well, I want to thank you, Danny, for your willingness to share your time, and more than that, just your willingness to take your own life almost as an experiment to show that people can do it, and that there's more out there than just making money, but there's some fulfillment out there as well. So thank you guys for being on with us today for today's summit. We will see you back next week.